What's going on, gamers? Today we'll be diving into a bit more Diablo 4 and we'll be discussing why Blizzard has changed how we'll be running dungeons when the game fully releases. So if you want to know why they're going to change things up, then stay tuned. That's coming up next. So today we're going to be looking at something that will definitely change how you'll be playing Diablo 4 in a big way when compared to most people who played the beta. Now, if you saw my last video, you'll probably know that Blizzard has been doing a huge amount of adjustments to the game in regards to balancing and playability. They've been taking feedback from the community about their beta demos and are trying to put it towards making things even better upon the game's full release. However, one thing they've done seems to be dividing fans, and that's the announcement that dungeons will no longer be resettable. Before in the demo, you could quite easily literally just hold one button and the dungeon that you're in is going to reset, as well as the instances around the world, making it so that you could pretty much get in, get out and jump straight back in again to a dungeon very fast, in order to farm one dungeon pretty much to your heart's desire. Now, if we look at the patch notes for this, they go on to state, so whilst Diablo 4 Sanctuary is home to over 100 dungeons, the open beta only had the subset offered in Act 1s, and that of Fractured Peaks for players to explore, and it had a level cap that isn't a full representation of the experience at launch. So from this alone, you can see that pretty much you're not gated in any way. You can level up your experience as you see fit. So unlike the demo, you're not going to be capped at 25 in any regions. You're pretty much free to do whatever you want. Now, there are many reasons to complete a variety of dungeons, including collecting powerful affixes in the Codex of Power, and players will still be able to repeat dungeons by partying up with others and having them start the dungeons as well. We also wanted to make sure that resetting the dungeons wasn't a way for hardcore players to avoid death when experiencing a challenge in a dungeon. Still, we know it can be fun to repeat a specific dungeon, and the team is looking at a more permanent solution to this, like having some reasonable cap on how many times the same dungeon can be completed in a row. It then goes on to say that even at endgame, there is a way to play dungeons over and over again, so you don't have to worry about the fact you will never be able to play these dungeons again, and that's going to be in the form of sigils that allow for nightmare dungeons to be unlocked, which is a more powerful version of dungeons with better loot, much tougher affixes, and just much more difficult overall. Now, as someone who's played more of these types of games than I can possibly list, let me tell you, even though this will definitely upset some players, it's definitely going to be a good thing for the future of the game. The reason for this, if they left it in, one, it could be quite game breaking in the fact that you could run the same dungeon consistently over and over again. We saw it even in the demo, I believe it's called Annika's Claim. Every single person got there as fast as they could, as soon as they could possibly defeat the enemies inside, because there was a whole bunch of elites, meaning that your drop rate was much higher for getting those legendaries and such. So now you'd be left with an open world game that they are trying to give you a lot of options and possibilities in which to explore, and every single person is going to have a meta of running straight to one particular dungeon and farming it over and over again in order to get XP fast, level up, and probably grab some of the best loot in the game straight away. 2, this will actually become quite boring. Even though people are used to doing this, I myself am definitely included in this. I run content like this constantly because, like I said, it does give you the best gear, so you pretty much will be doing it just because of that fact. But it does get tedious, it does get old very fast, and it does kind of take away from the whole open world aspect of the game. And lastly, it's not what they were actually intending. The reason for betas is to see if they've got any issues in the game and then to try and fix them. This, in my opinion, was one of their biggest ones. If they made it this way, there's a very distinct possibility that every single player who knew what they were doing would beeline straight for a certain dungeon. It's going to be the one that gives you the most loot drops, has the most elites, is the most efficient, gives you the most XP. That's going to be the one you go for. You're going to farm that continuously, then crack through the storyline, and you're going to be able to make sure you're completely kitted out in a lot of the best gear very easy and fast. As someone who has done this multiple times, even in games such as Destiny, shooting at a loot cave for more hours than I would really like to admit, I think them looking at this and changing it before the full game's release is actually a bit of a blessing in disguise. And although there'll definitely be people saying, well, it's an open world game, I should be able to play it how I see fit, that's definitely true, but I don't think that's what they were actually aiming for with this game in general. Even as far as I'm aware, with the nightmare sigils, once you obtain them, they're linked to a specific dungeon. Rather than you turning it in and getting the dungeon you're after, it's going to be linked to a specific one around the world, and then you'll be able to run that one, again allowing you for quite a bit of different variety if you wanted to be doing those nightmare dungeons. rather than just trying to do the same thing over and over again. Ultimately, to me, it looks like Blizzard are trying to make a game with a lot of quality of life, giving you enough freedom to tackle things as you want to, but also not narrowing you down so that you only tackle one thing pretty much constantly. Remember, even when they brought out the endgame, a lot of people were saying it wasn't enough and they were worried for the game's future. You can't be in the same boat of saying there's not enough content in the game if you're also a person who's just happy to run one cave over and over and over again for a day, a week, however long it takes to completely max your character out and get all of the best stuff in the game near enough. So with this slight fix, they've probably made the world a lot more entertaining. I really don't think these dungeons will stay as not resettable whatsoever. Probably if you close down the game and come back on again, or there'll be a time limit in the future. From what I can gather, they just don't want you being able to go straight back into a dungeon, completely farm everything as fast as possible, as they believe it's going to take away from the overall experience. Which it almost definitely would. They've created over 120 dungeons in the game, all with different puzzles, different affixes, there's nightmare versions, there's going to be hell tides, there's world bosses. They're aiming for a bit of variety. So when they saw everyone running the same dungeon in the demo, they probably thought they made a bit of a blunder, and this is how they're going to remedy that, and they still said they're looking at it in the future. Like I said, to me this is definitely a good thing, as now even with things like events where you're going to be getting those obels in order to get legendaries from those will make a lot more sense. Whereas before you wouldn't need them because you would just be focusing on one dungeon. But yeah, let me know in the comments. I'm not trying to annoy anyone, hopefully I haven't upset anyone with this, but personally I think this is definitely going to work out for the future of the game because it's just going to give it a lot more playability overall. But as always, for all things gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.